we're just going to dive right in. We have an amazing first speaker. Many of you already know her. And she's actually joining us from Uganda, Yvette Chesson-Wureh. I am so excited to introduce her. I think a lot of you know that she was our She Does honoree in 2018. Yvette is the establishment coordinator of the Liberian-based organization called Angie Brooks International Center for Women's Empowerment, Leadership Development, International Peace and Security. And She Can and the Angie Brooks Center are in partnership. And so together we're working to build our program in Liberia. And we're really glad that we have the support of Yvette and her team. I love talking about Yvette because she is a fearless and courageous leader in many, many ways. I'm going to explain several things, but I think this is a small piece of what Yvette has accomplished. But right now, recently she was made co-chair of FemWise, which is an organization that's represented by 15 countries under the African Union, and she's in charge of the West. And what they do is they lead negotiations and mediation centers to resolve peace-related conflicts with leaders across all levels. So they're doing mediations with armed guerrillas, village chiefs, presidents, and kings. Someone all the way to the national level is dealing with armed kings and the region. They're doing it all. The other thing that Yvette is really known for is creating the Women's Situation Room, which is an organization that started in Liberia during the presidential elections, and it's now been instigated into 7 different African countries. And she's in Kampala, Uganda right now with a team of 25 eminent women leaders. They're protecting the presidential race there, where there's a young singer who's challenging the 35-year rule of President Museveni. You'll hear more, I'm sure, about the Situation Room, but basically it's a program to help secure and keep safe elections throughout Africa. Yvette is also an entrepreneur. She believes in the power of entrepreneurship, especially in supporting women. And there's a lot of projects that are really fun to talk about. She's organized coffee growers in Liberia, and the Pink Panthers, a group of female motorcycle taxi operators, which she organized to become self-empowered. Her education started in Liberia, but she ended it with a Juris Doctorate law degree with honors from North Carolina Central University School of Law. And she served on a lot of US and Liberian boards. She's been on the United States Supreme Court Bar, the US Federal District Bar, and the Association of Female Lawyers of Liberia. In 2009, Yvette was asked by President Sirleaf to manage an international conference called the International Colloquium for Women's Empowerment, Leadership Development, International Peace and Security. It was held in Monrovia. Thousands of women came, many, many distinguished leaders and presidents. They convened for a two-day meeting about the vital role of helping countries resolve and avoid conflict. Yvette really is an international leader. She is making a difference in establishing and maintaining peace throughout Africa. And she's in our inner circle. She's not just our keynote speaker. She's committed to helping She Can be stronger and more impactful. She really wants to make this session interactive. So I just want to say, if you have a question, just tell them, yesterday we wrote the questions in. You might just say, Amanda, I want to ask Yvette a question. You can do it either way, but we want to have you all talking throughout. So with that, I think, Hope, do you want to say one last word?
Yes, thank you. That was really impressive. And we're really honored to have Counsellor Chesson-Wureh joining us today. Thank you.
Great. Take it away, Yvette.
Thank you very much, Barbara. Thank you for that great introduction. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depends on where you're calling from or where you're online from. But hello to everybody, Happy New Year. It's always an honor and pleasure to to work with She Can or with the scholars and with anything else that She Can wants, because we know that She Can actually looks out for the women, especially the women in Africa. And that is where our heart lies. And there's nothing better than education to move a woman out of poverty and into leadership. So we 100% support She Can and partner with them, and will continue to do so. For today, I really want an interactive session. I'm starting off with Ann Houston's blog. Ann Houston is someone who does a blog, and she does one on leadership. And I liked what she looked at what courage looks like in a leader, is her question in her blog. And she listed 8 things that courage look like in a leader. And I'm going to tell you what they are, and I will give you some incidents, I think, that speak from me to it. But first of all, let me tell you the first one is having the courage to seek and receive feedback. Anne says a courageous leader is someone who isn't afraid to honestly and openly seek out feedback from those around them. They'll be opening to listening to the unfiltered feedback, which may not necessarily be easy to hear, and will be willing to learn from and make changes based on this. Now, in my work, I have found that leaders often think that they know better than others and believe that is why they lead. But the reverse is true. It is knowing you do not know better than others, but you are just better situated to learn from others and to implement that makes you a good leader. It is my practice to hold staff meetings of my organization, and to include everybody, including drivers and janitors. You will be surprised at what wisdom you can glean from someone who sweeps the floor, but who has had vast life experiences. Criticism is difficult to hear if you take it as condemnation of yourself. However, if you look at it as a learning tool and filter out your emotions of anger, shame, and how dare you, you will learn to welcome it and even seek it out as a tool to enable you to perform better the next time. I value friends and colleagues that are straight shooters and whom I know will tell me you could have done better on that speech. Or when you were implementing that project, did you think of consulting so-and-so? I learned from criticism. It has made me a better leader, and this is an ongoing process. Encourage pushback. It stirs the creative juices and makes you think and a better advocate. Remember to keep communication open. The next one she had was having courage of convictions. And she says courageous leaders must be prepared to hold steady and be absolutely clear on their values and principles at all times. They must have the courage to stick to these, even when the easiest thing to do is to compromise in order to chase profits, reach targets, or avoid difficult or crucial conversations. They will always strive to do what is right rather than what is expedient. Why do I do what I do? Is a question they will always ask themselves and challenge those around them to ask too. Now, this is so true. Gosh, there are times when I say, God, can I just ignore this and let it go? The answer is no. I will give you an example here. I have been asked by an international organization to go to an African country and help the women there implement the Women's Situation Room, which is the mechanism you just heard Barbara tell you about, that I initiated to mobilize, harness, and tap on the expertise and experience of women and youth to eliminate and or mitigate potential violence before, during, and after elections. After I interacted with the women of the country, I found out that they were more interested in stakeholder meetings and photo opportunities with the elite of the government and electoral management bodies than they were with the disadvantaged and impoverished youth of the ghettos, whom the politicians recruit to initiate electoral violence and disrupt the electoral process. These youth are the pivotal segment of society with whom the Women's Situation Room partnered to prevent electoral violence. A dilemma arose. Should I stay and engage in this extreme modification of the room? No problems, no arguments. The international organization will continue funding me as I had done what they wanted, lending my name and the brand of the Women's Situation Room to this event. I would have the blessing of the women of this country, keep friendship, smooth sailing, no feathers ruffled. Done. That is not what happened. I had to dig deep within me for my values and those of the Women's Situation Room, and had to make the decision to leave those women after I made sure that they could not use the name of the WSR for their project, as it did not embody the values, goals, and objectives of the Women's Situation Room. The result? The international organization stopped funding me for a bit, but then they came back on board. The women leaders were quite upset and probably still are, but they have expressed tremendous respect by even joining in the vote to elect me co-chair of FemWise, the women mediators of the 15 countries of West Africa. I'm not sure how warm is going to be their reception of me when I return to their country, but I am intact, and so is the WSR. Now, the next one is being prepared to let go of precious practices. Someone who is a courageous leader and says, won't be reluctant to let go of doing things in a way that it had previously always been done. They will have the skills to recognize when a practice or way of doing things is no longer working or fit for the purpose, and will have the courage to challenge this. This means they must be prepared to let go, take risks, and try new things. I have to tell you about the WSR because this incident is happening even as we speak. Consistent within the WSR, we have challenges, we have innovations, and we have to think outside the box because that's what makes it so unique, the flexibility that women bring. Please remember you are a woman and you come with certain innate abilities to do things that men simply don't have. You can multitask. You are used to resolving conflicts because this is what you do on a daily basis as mothers, even as older sisters and things like that. We intervene and we get things done. So use what you have, use the tools that are innately in you. So we are also always trying to up our game in the Situation Room. We have a great practice in the WSR of having a youth room in which youth gang leaders from slums convene during the electoral period and consult each other and resolve conflicts in their communities during the WSR. The youth of our most recent country came up with an innovation, a new idea of having desks in the ghettos. Desks manned by them that will give us women immediate access to what is happening as it happens. There was a pushback from some of the women who were afraid of the security forces and what they may do to those manning the desks. But we decided to put safety measures in place and do it. The youth room is okay and still exists, but it's going to exist with the youth ghetto desk. Having the courage to innovate. Anne says courageous leaders aren't reluctant to innovate and do things differently. The word fail means first attempt in learning. Please remember that, fail, first attempt in learning. Therefore, courageous leaders must be able to accept in themselves and others the potential of failure that may come from trying to innovate and see failure as a learning tool for future business growth and development. Even though we may see failure as that, I want to talk on this portion about innovation and having to have the courage to do it on the spur of the moment and relying on yourself and relying on your intuition and remembering that you have within skills that you may not even be aware of. We're in Sierra Leone. And while we were implementing the Situation Room in 2012, a situation arose in which one of the securities, the presidential guards, entered a polling booth in which all the women in that booth, all the election officers in that booth were women. He entered this booth at 10:00 p.m. and started to threaten them. This was just while they were starting to count the votes. Started to threaten these women to the point that they felt they could no longer continue and they needed to move out. They needed to report it to the Elections Commission. When they did it, they didn't get an immediate response. They needed to get out of there. The Elections Commission was like, all right, hold on, we'll recount your votes later, blah, blah, blah. But these women were terrified for their lives. They called the Women's Situation Room and felt that this man was very threatening and he had security with him that were also threatening them. And here we are at that time of the night thinking, what do we do? Whom do we turn to? How can you turn to the police? It was the police that was doing this. How do you turn to other security forces? They all fall under him. What do? We finally decided to do this. We took some women from the Situation Room, took T-shirts, our Women's Situation Room T-shirts, went to the polling booth, the polling station, called the women out one by one on the side while he was terrorizing the others. We'll call you on the side, you will come, we'll just put our T-shirt over you and say, walk out. Because when they saw the Women's Situation Room T-shirt, they didn't harass us or bother us. They just let us walk around. And they were concentrating on trying to harass others. So we just did that with all the women in that booth who were electoral management officials, and they were able to get out calmly. So sometimes it really takes a lot of thinking outside of the box. They need to innovate. We can't continue to say that. So I really want you to know that. Then having the courage to admit mistakes. Oh, wow. Okay. Anne says being able to admit to mistakes and vulnerabilities is something all courageous leaders must do. By staying in adult mode and acknowledging errors and vulnerabilities, leaders create a culture of trust with those around them. And this is also very true. And it's also very difficult for people who have egos. And believe me, women leaders have some terrible egos. But I must say that the courage to admit mistakes is a growth process. It's a great process because, first of all, when you acknowledge the mistake has been made, you're then able to rectify it, and you yourself are able to grow. And I will give you an example of where I felt I made a mistake. Funnily enough, this question was asked to me about a month ago by some journalists that were interviewing me about what mistake would I said I made that maybe I will look on differently. And I sat for a while and said, what mistake? And I said, this, because this was a glaring mistake, believe me. So I went to Guinea and went there also to institute the Women's Situation Room. And at the time while there with the women, saw that they also, like the other women I told you about, were not ready to do things the way in which we in the Situation Room normally do things. And they were constantly making errors of judgment that I felt was causing lives on the ground. One of the errors of judgment was we were about to see the opposition leader at the time, and they wanted to take a whole convoy of women with them to see the opposition leader. And I'm saying to them, no, this isn't how it's done. You have to see these people privately. If you see them with their entourage or in the offices, they have to do whatever their party says. But if you can see them privately and have a discussion and move off the scene, they can adapt whatever you need and say to their constituents. But of course, it didn't listen. We ended up with a 40 car convoy to see this opposition leader. And of course, we got there. It was just a total waste of time as far as I was concerned. Because just like I said, he just kept talking about his party line because his entire party was surrounding him, etc. And after that, and about 2 other incidents where they were not listening and wanted to do things their way and didn't want to get involved with the youth, they felt they were too high for looting to be dealing with these young, dirty young people who actually were the instigators, were the ones that were violent, and that they were the perpetrators of the violence, and you don't want to deal with them. So I was like, oh no, I'm out of here. So I got up and left. And afterwards, I thought that was a mistake. And the reason I thought it was a mistake upon reflection was, first, I had to learn that we have to meet people where they are, not where we want to take them. As leaders, you must remember that. Assess people where they are and not necessarily where you want to take them. Sometimes you have to stay with them to encourage them or to show them the way, no matter how many times they don't want to listen to you. Sometimes you just have to stick there for the benefit of the country, especially when you're dealing with lives. I was dealing with lives. I felt that was an error for me to leave that particular situation because I had made some inroads in other areas. And even if it's 1 or 2 inroads, it's better than none at all. So to me, that was a mistake. And that was something, I learned something from that. I learned also, maybe my ego was a bit too big and it needed to shut up and sit down. I also learned that. Now, having the courage to challenge yourself to be different and think differently. Anne says a courageous leader must not be afraid to embrace diversity in all its facets, seeing diversity as an opportunity rather than a challenge. This is something that just happened in December last year, a couple of weeks ago. As a matter of fact, around the week of December 17, 2020. In Liberia, time was against me. I was preparing to come to Uganda. Literally had landed in Liberia, had 4 days, needed to get back up and come back to Uganda. I had just left Ghana, hit Liberia, had to turn around and come to Uganda. A woman was running for senator of one of our counties. We were having senatorial elections in December. I didn't know her or her politics, had no idea who she was. It came to my organization's attention that this woman was being barred from participating in the final phase of the electoral process, even though she had 446 votes in the lead and was the only woman in the race. The chief of the last town to which the elections had to be done, okay? And this town had 2,021 votes. The chief had confiscated all of the ballot boxes. He then brought out our male society devil. We call them the devil. This is our tradition masquerade dancers, but they're more than dancers. They're masquerade, part of the secret society, which women cannot see, and have put this woman in a field outside the town and refused to allow her and her supporters entrance to the town. When the devil came out, everyone, including the police, the joint security, and the elections commission personnel ran, leaving the woman and her followers totally unprotected. The woman's supporters, some of them ran to the security forces for protection and were allegedly raped by them. This came to the attention of the chair of my organization, Ulubanki King Akareli, and myself. And we decided to do something about it. Initially, I was reluctant as to how much time I could give this issue as I was preparing to leave for Uganda. Outraged by this male chauvinistic behavior and supported by my chair, we called together women organizations, with me having only 4 days. We got financial support to send women for the woman candidate and bring her to Monrovia, which is the capital of Liberia, for safe haven, as the male politicians were hunting her to kill her, and she was hiding in our forests. In the meantime, they beat up her brother, who is a lawyer and the head of our Law Reform Commission, to an inch of his life. We also had meetings, which I chaired, with the Minister of Justice and the Minister of Internal Affairs, that has oversight over all our traditional practices, and who were able to get them to agree to provide adequate protection for the woman candidate and to suspend the town chief and stop the country devil. We held a press conference and were on all television and radio stations, with print media carrying our message, calling for unbiased and undiscriminatory application of our electoral laws. Also calling our traditional council to stop the use of the devil as a means of intimidation by opposing candidates during elections, as this was a desecration of our national heritage symbols. After I left the press conference and came to Uganda, the women also had a meeting with the Elections Commission demanding equal application of our electoral laws, including the right to campaign in the town. Elections were held yesterday. I'm pleased to inform you the woman won. I still don't know her.
Yvette, that's incredible. Can I interrupt for just a moment? We have a question from Hope, and I'd love for her to unmute and ask, if that's all right with you.
Sure.
Great.
Of course, I was just asking, as a leader, how do you admit your mistake and still maintain your reputation?
Oh, okay. That's a very good question, Hope. Lots of times, well, it depends on how the mistake is done. Like I said, this mistake that I made that I told you about in Guinea was a mistake that upon reflection, because I was really distraught over the idea that I was leaving that country the way I did. I was really upset about it. So I had to come home and sit down and think it through and say to myself, did you do everything you could have done to save the day? Did you use all the tools that you had available? And finally came to that realization of a mistake. There are other mistakes that you make publicly. Really, you do. And you may make a mistake publicly. If you are lucky enough to come to the realization it's a mistake while you're still in that public arena, the best thing to do is to apologize, say, oh, that was a mistake. I'm sorry, and get over it and move on. If it is something that you've done, but you're not in the arena when the realization comes upon you that it was a mistake, but someone brings it up to you, instead of yelling and screaming at the person who brought it up to you that it was a mistake, it's the acceptance that this was a mistake. You are fallible. You are not infallible. You are not God. You're going to make mistakes, but accept them and accept them as learning tools. And once you can apologize for them, if you can remedy them, please do so. If you cannot, all you can do is apologize and hope they will accept that apology.
Thank you. We have a few more questions coming in. Would you like to take those now, or do you want to hold them until you finish yours?
No, please go ahead.
Okay.
Please go ahead.
Charlie, would you like to unmute and ask your question?
Yes, Councillor Yvette, so I would like to know, because you are working in different countries and dealing with different people, so how have you built allies that help you in implementing your concepts?
Oh, that's a good question. Thank you, Tale. As we go ahead in the Situation Room, we build allies, because is important. One thing, not only with the Situation Room, but even the Angie Brooks International Center, we always collaborate. Don't go it alone. It doesn't make sense. Collaborate, bring in other leaders, sit down, and in Liberia, we say hang head, think together, brainstorm together. And the more women you have on board, the better for you, because these allies have reached where you may not have reached, and they will support you. So what we do as we go along, let me give you the example of the Women's Situation Room. I've just come to Uganda, right? Even though this is my second time in Uganda, I was here in 2016. But before I came, the women organizations of Uganda got together and decided, they looked at my work and decided, oh yes, we want the Women's Situation Room back here again. They then wrote me and said, can you come and implement it again? So I agreed. But then I said, you know, we have the African eminent women that need to come on board. And the African eminent women is always, they're always asked to come on board by the Angie Brooks International Center. And they say, yes, sure, we know that, please go ahead. So in me reaching other women in Africa who are prominently situated, they then come into the Women's Situation Room and are able to lend their talents to the room. I'll give you examples of who's here right now, okay? Dr. Yvette Chesney-Wureh, the first woman chancellor of the University of Ghana. She was the highest ranking woman in the United Nations as deputy head of the International Labour Organization in Geneva for the United Nations. She has so many firsts, I can't even go there. She is a member of the African Union Panel of the Wise. You have someone that you know, Counsellor Francis Johnson Allison, who's been our Chief Justice, the Chief Justice of Liberia, former Chief Justice of Liberia, former head of the National Elections Commission, former Minister of Justice, former Minister of Commerce. She is here. You have Sipang Mosina, who is the current deputy chair in the parliament in Lesotho, and the only woman deputy in the parliament in Lesotho. She is here. We're very happy to have her here. She's a young woman that's starting out in parliament, and so she is here. These are the type of women that we have right now in the Women's Situation Room, lending their support to the women of Uganda. So we build on this. We call on these eminent women from African countries, and we collaborate with them by giving them the space and the exposure to actually do the work. So that's how the Situation Room is done. In Liberia, when I'm doing the Angie Brooks International Center, just like I told you in this example I gave you of the lady who just won as the other senator. We now have 2 senators who are women in Liberia. When we were doing that work, as you saw, we pulled together the women organizations and we went for it together. So please always try to collaborate. And it also helps to build your sister organizations, because you will always find that there are problems in the other organizations, but you can help build them up as well. So that's how we do it.
While we're talking about teams, we'll go with one more question from Michelle, if you're comfortable unmuting and asking, and then we can dive back in. And we have more questions for the end. The scholars are very engaged. Thank you.
Okay, so I'm Michelle and I'm from Liberia. My question is, as a leader, sometimes we face problems. So how do you motivate your team or those you are leading to stay motivated despite these obstacles?
Yeah, that's true. You really face some downtime as leaders, whether it is due to lack of funding, whether it's due to something that happened that caused the whole organization to become demoralized, whether it is because the organization is targeted. All of those things definitely demoralize this one. But you do that by having open communication with your team. Have an open communication with your team and try to inspire them and say, okay, we're down today. Yeah, so-and-so is happening. But look, there's light at the end of the tunnel. There's something we can do here. Even if we're starting off small, even if we're not at the same level we were before, don't give up. Don't give up. Because the values for which we are moving this organization are values that make a difference in this world. And I believe in those values. And if you're working with me, you believe in those values. Let us see what we can do. All right, we're starting smaller. We're not as big as we were before, but you don't know what God has. You don't know how he's going to open the door. Just let's keep on keeping on and move them to see the vision and to know that they can still achieve.
Thank you. I want to make sure we can get to those final points because I want to know all the things that courage looks like in a leader, and then we'll circle back around to more questions.
I think that's my phone now. Yeah. Sorry, 1 second, that's my phone. Can I call you back on the webinar? Who's it? Yeah, good evening. All right. Okay.
And you can all keep your questions coming in. This is great.
Call me in an hour. I'm in a webinar. Call me in an hour. Thank you. I'm sorry, it's my hotel trying to find out how my day was. It's my hotel trying to find out how my day was.
Invite them to the call.
Sorry. Oh gosh.
But we'll turn it back over to you now so that you can finish your address.
Okay, there are only two more things. Having the courage to have difficult conversations. And I want to tell you this. Wow, this is so true. That's why I like Anne's 8 points, because I embrace all of them. And I really know that they work. And I really know that they are true. Courageous leaders should not walk away from having potentially difficult or uncomfortable conversations. Instead, they must be strong enough to initiate difficult conversations and work through them in order to move forward. This means having real, honest conversations, even when there is a potential for conflict. And I want to thank Anne for that, because this truly takes courage, especially when you have to speak truth to power. In my work, I have come to expect that as a norm. It is not easy, and it's still not getting easier. I'm not going to fool you and say, as you do it, it gets easier for you to do. It does not get easier. Okay, I have to speak truth to some of the most powerful men and women on the continent of Africa. I must meet with absolute dictators and tell them things that none of their citizens dare tell them. Someone has to do it. You have to say what needs to be said. It is also the way in which you do it. There's a saying in Liberia that you can tell a man to go and jump in the lake and he will fight you all the way. Or you can say it another way and he will run to the lake and jump in. So remember, that is how you say it. The last one is having the courage to step out of unproductive or unhelpful situations. A courageous leader must be brave enough to both recognize and move away from unproductive, unhealthy, or unhelpful situations. They should be able to recognize these for what they are and be able to step away from them towards most positive and productive interventions that help them and their organization thrive. You have the example I'd given to you before regarding the other country I went to. But another thing we must remember, don't keep beating a dead horse to death. People will disagree with you. Or you may want them to do something, but they cannot see your vision. Stop. Close that conversation down. It's unproductive. If you have to collaborate with that person, find out what they can do and support it for them to do it. Find other partners to accomplish your goals. I have the situation in my organization where I have to call together women organizations, and some of them cannot do what needs to be done. So we have to find out what they can do and support whatever they can do and move forward. Remember, courageous leadership is not only courage to make unpopular decisions, but includes thinking outside the box, implementing things that others tell you will fail. Have faith in yourself. Go for it. Innovate, implement, fail, and then dust yourself off and start again. You are a woman. You are flexible. You are courageous with the ability to take on the world. Let's go, girl. Thank you.
Thank you. Oh my goodness, that's inspiring. I love your definition of fail too, that it's a first attempt in learning. It's so true.
Yeah.
I'm going to turn it back over to the scholars for a little bit because we just have questions pouring in. So Makara, do you want to unmute and ask your question?
Sure. Thank you so much for sharing your experiences. As a leader, I would love to know, like, what are your other main values that you value, but also, like, how do you make your teammates understand and also respect those values?
Well, I have lots of values. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Liberia. I believe in Africa, but more importantly, I'm also a feminist. I believe in women and what women in the world can do. And so, funnily enough, the way in which I let other members of the team see the vision and know, and they have to learn who you are as a leader by the way in which you behave, because you must mirror what you want. And so I will have meetings with them. I will give you one example. I had a meeting. One thing that came up was the matter of homosexuality. And in Liberia, it's a big taboo, okay? So I'm sitting down there and someone had come to me and said that this young man, who himself is not a homosexual, but was an advocate for homosexuals, had been beaten at the University of Liberia. And because he was going to the university and they had beaten him, etc. And I'm just appalled. And I'm sitting in this staff meeting when this person had come and whispered this into my ear. And I stopped the staff meeting. I said, excuse me, before, let's suspend this a minute. Something very disturbing has come up. I'm being told that this young man has been beaten. Does anyone here know of him or know him? And one of the young guys picks up, pull out his hand. He said, yes, he's my classmate at the university. And I said, oh, okay, we need to see how he is and let's see how we can assist here. And this young man was absolutely appalled. He was like, what? No, he's a homosexual. Even if he isn't, he advocates for them. I don't want nothing to do with him. And I'm sitting there in shock. And I'm like, what? This is a human being. Do you not know that? I said, I don't care what his sexual preference is. And we have to show some tolerance here. And I'm going off on us being tolerant of others and of others of diverse background. And these people are just like, oh no, we can't believe this, counselor. We really can't do this. And I said, oh, but we are going to do it. We are going to do it because that's the right thing to do. And you have to let people know what is the right thing to do. And you have to have the courage to step outside the box, even when everybody else is saying no, because innately you believe and you know it's the right thing to do. Eventually, the people in my office came to even reluctantly accept that homosexuals have a right to live, because they hadn't even accepted that. You know, so you have to mirror what you believe in. really, and motivate people to do it.
Thank you, Yvette, and thank you as a member of the LGBTQ community myself. Thank you for sharing that specific example.
You're welcome.
Jenny, can I ask you to unmute and ask your question?
Yeah, okay. So I was just concerned from hearing your story about the Guinea experience. So I was asking, like, what steps can I take now as an emerging leader to, approach obstacles or adversities when leading a group of people?
Well, I think it depends on what obstacles you're facing, when you are leading this group of persons. I don't know what the obstacles are to be able to give you specific examples. But, as a leader, again, please remember to communicate. That, I think, is our biggest failing, is that we have these wonderful conversations in our heads. We really do. And we get up and we want to do something and we just like, oh yes, we're going to do A, B, C, and D, da, 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 da. And the whole thought of the process and the contribution to the process has been us and not others. And the others are trying to catch up with you because you are the leader, and they're trying to understand your vision, and they're trying to see where you're coming from, and they're trying to see themselves in what you're doing. But I'm unable to do it because they were not there from the initiation, or you didn't bounce it off there, or you didn't have a brainstorming session, or you didn't bring them in the way in which they could understand. You've already seen the vision, you already have the roadmap, but it's to bring them along. So that is an important concept, is to make sure you bring people along with you.
So similarly, I think Moon has a question that's a great follow-up for this about the challenges in bringing people along. Moon, can you unmute and ask your question?
Sure. Thank you so much for sharing your experience and also real example that very inspiring. So I just want to hear about your tip, how to show with the people that, just like you sit in the room and they don't like to admit their mistake and also didn't listen to feedback from the other people. So how can you solve with this kind of people?
Okay, I hope I understand you. You want to know how to manage with people when you make mistakes?
Oh, I'm sorry, just like when you sit in the room, but people don't like to, admit their mistake and also don't like to listen feedback from the other people. They just,
Yeah, you do have that, Moon, to tell you the truth, you do have that, where people will shut you down. They will shut you down. Because even if you start and you're talking to somebody who's a leader or purported leader, and there are mistakes that they've made, and you want to bring it to their attention, and they certainly don't want to hear from you, because like I said, they will take it personally instead of taking it as a means to grow. So they will shut you down and like, no, that didn't happen. No, or whatever manner they use to shut you down. So when you reach that stage, if the mistake that a person made was a serious one that could impact whatever you all are doing together as partners, I think you may have, the best way is to do it in a private setting where no one else is. And that way it's easier for that person to take it, because they may be feeling publicly shamed, and that's why they're shutting you down. It has nothing to do with the fact that they don't know that they've made a mistake. Some of them know they've made a mistake but are being publicly shamed. And so you need to yourself find a way in which you can privately bring it to their attention. Others, I don't care whether you're public or private, they are not going to accept it. So you also have to accept that's just how some people are.
There's a lot of interest in managing group dynamics. A lot of questions coming in about that. Thierry, are you comfortable unmuting and asking your question?
Sure. Thank you so much for sharing. I'm really interested about your point about courage of having difficult conversation. And I think I express that a lot sometimes when I work as in group project and something like that. So my question is, in your experience as a leader, was there any situation when there are conflicts happening among your team members? And what did you do to resolve the conflicts, like conflict of opinions? Yeah.
Yeah. That definitely deals with the group dynamics. And one thing you can do is get everybody to calm down. Then focus on the issue and not the person. You know, a lot of times people have perceived ideas of different persons. It may have nothing to do with the issue. Believe me, it may have nothing to do with the issue. It may be that person had done something to the other person, or the other person had perceived that something had been done, and therefore they're just going to take this opportunity to get back at them. All of that. You just stop everything and say, hey, let's concentrate here. What is the issue? And everyone has an opinion here. Can we start listing what the opinions are, dealing with the issue and only the issue? And that way you break down that whole barrier. All that personal stuff just gets out of the way, and people have to deal with what the question is, what the issue is, and what they can bring to resolve that issue. And you just have to take charge of that situation and do that. And I found that to be the most effective way of cutting out all this you say, he say, what happened, how it didn't happen. I'm not interested in that. This is the issue. Now, what are you bringing to the table regarding this issue? How do we resolve it? And I'm willing to listen to everybody's opinion on the issue and keep to that.
I love that. You don't make it about the person, you make it about the issue. That's critical. Jel, are you here? Can you unmute and ask your question?
Yes. So when you talked about unproductive conversation, the first thing that came to my mind was I would just tell the person, shut up, or like say, stop it. But I want to know, I'm really interested in knowing how I can really stop unproductive conversation or situation.
Unproductive conversations. Sometimes you just have to say, can we table this? This really isn't a good time for me to have this discussion. Can we do it at another time? You know, and that way the person doesn't feel they've been shut down. They feel that you've left a door open for them to bring it up at another time. And sometimes you just have to say, I really have to go. I would love to continue this conversation another time, but I really have to go. And you just exit, you know? So there's no, don't tell them shut up and all of that. Besides it being rude, it leaves the person with a bad taste in their mouth. And that very same person may come up with some very good idea in the future with a conversation you really want to have with them. So always try and leave with the ability to come back. Always leave that ability to come back, because you never know what somebody may come up with at a time you may need it. So I think that's it, but you do have to have the courage to stop it. You really do. The same way you have to have the courage to have it. You have to have the courage to stop the unproductive ones.
Without burning bridges.
Yes, definitely.
Makra, I think you have a great quick follow-up. Do you want to just ask your follow-up question?
Follow up to the last point of like having the courage to step out of unproductive situation. What are ways to assess when to keep being persistent and when to step out of that unhealthy situations? Like, how do we draw that line?
Well, I think when it comes out to how do you make a determination that this is going nowhere, I think if you keep asking the same questions or keep presenting the same requests and you are getting nowhere, okay? And you just consistently do it, it makes no sense. So you finally say, okay, they're incapable of doing this. I need to close this conversation down and look for someone else to handle this. You know, I'll give you an example. One of the things that we do in the room is that we hold stakeholder meetings. And in one of the countries we went to, I had asked for stakeholder meetings with the head of the police. And I kept getting all this saying, oh no, we can have a meeting with the assistant. We can have a meeting with this person, other than the head of the police. And I was like, please remember, the police is a paramilitary organization. Everybody under the head of the police does what they're told to do. They don't make decisions. Decisions are made either from the IGP, the Inspector General, or his deputies. Nobody else. Everybody else implements. So I will not waste my time by having meetings with assistant IGPs and directors. It's a waste of my time and energy because they have to take direction from the head. So as we're going through these things, and I'm consistently insisting I must have this meeting, it finally occurred to me, wait, Yvette, stop it, you're beating a dead horse here. Either these people are unable or incapable of giving you the appointment you want. You know, stop, sit back, tell them it's okay, let them do whatever they're doing at the lowest level. You just forget them and go to the highest level. Find someone who can actually do what you want done. So that's what I had to do. So you yourself have to come to the realization that your conversations are unproductive or unhelpful, and you really just need to find another means to implement what you need.
Thank you. And then I think we'll close it out. Barb has a question she'd love to run by you.
Okay.
So I'm lucky enough to have heard you several times, and I was hoping that you would use an example to elaborate on the having challenging conversations and, you know, the thing you said about, you know, you can ask someone to jump in a lake or you can get them to go in the lake. And I remember you telling a story that I would so love to hear again when you were talking to the chief about ending FGM in his village and how you got him to do that. It was so powerful, and I think about it all the time.
Oh, that was dealing with our traditional council, I think. And I hope that's the one you're talking about.
You got him to be the one who wanted to end it.
Yes. And what happened is a conversation had arisen with the UN Women of Liberia, in which they had called the women organizations together, and they said to the women organizations, oh, you know, we still have this matter of the FGM in Liberia, and we want to end it, and we need to stop it. And then they start telling me all the different things, or telling us, because of the women organization, all the different things they were doing to end FGM in Liberia. And I said to them, really, who have you all engaged? And they're saying, oh, we called the women together. I said, for what? Where's the traditional council? Where's the head of the traditional council? This is a traditional practice. It isn't a practice that just came out of nowhere. It's a traditional practice. And it is something that is encouraged by the traditional council. Unless we reach the head of the traditional council, we're wasting our time, and I really don't have time to waste. So you all have to decide if you want to do that or not. So they agreed, and right away I got out of the chair. I said, let's go to the traditional council, meet with the chief. And we did, we met with him and got there, and he came in to meet with us, and he saw us there. He said, oh, Councillor, you here? Why are you here? I said, oh, Chief, I've got something we really need to put to you. We really do. We need your help, huh? And he said, what? I said, you know, all this talk about FGM keeps coming up, and people keep talking about stopping FGM. And we know the FGM is done in our schools, in our bush. We call it the bush schools. And, but all those schools, you control them. Who can talk about FGM without talking to the chief? It's a waste of time. Chief, I don't know why these people waste all this time and energy talking to all these people. They're nobody. You're the only person that can do this. So we come to you to ask you to please, we want you to stop the FGM. And he sat there and he looked at me and he said, what made you think about it? Who made you think to come to me? I said, you forget the house from which I come, the house of the kings of the wise. We know what chiefs can do. We know who's who in the bush. So we've come to you because you had it, and we're asking you to stop it. And we're asking you to lead the campaign against FGM. And he said, wow, you came to the right place. He said, I'm stopping the schools, all the ones that are illegally operating, I will stop them right away. And then I will gradually stop the others. And he started to do it. But again, it was whether we were going to go to him and start yelling, oh, chief, you know what? You have to stop this now. Right now, it's a bad practice. It's a bad cultural practice, blah, blah, blah. He would have just sat there, looked at us and said, all right. And let us talk, and finish and say, have a nice day, goodbye. And it's different the way in which we approach him. We approach him with utmost respect, understanding that he was the chief, understanding that he was the head of traditional practices in Liberia, understanding that he had the power and the authority to bring a closure to this matter. And that made a difference. Again, you are right, Barbara. That is a way in which you can show whether that man fights you all the way or he runs and jumps in. That's definitely, I have forgotten about that. Truly I had, but thank you for bringing it
I
back.
hadn't forgotten. When I have a hard conversation, I think, now, how did she go to him again? Like, I wanted to hear it again for myself. Oh my gosh. This, you know, Yvette, you certainly are the leader that I think we all hope to be, myself included. It's so inspiring. I almost have tears listening to you. And I think this was just an amazing gift for all of us.
Thank you.
It was a privilege to hear you. And it's a privilege to have you in the She Can Inner Circle. And
thank you.
Yvette and I have lots of ideas of how we're going to change Liberia through women's leadership together.
Yes.
Yes. Well, I'm going to just say that I hope that you stay safe. The last time I talked to you, that she was in Liberia and she was sending me videos of people shooting people all over the place. So I hope it stays calm, if it is calm, and that everything goes well for you. We love you. Thank you so much.
Same here. Thank you all so much. And thanks for the partnership. Thanks for the love. And best wishes to all the scholars. We really wish that you do well. And we know you will. And that when you get back to your various countries, I really want to see the women leaders that you will become. Thank you.
All of you from Liberia, raise your hand. Yeah, thank you, Yvette. If you're from Liberia, raise your hand so she knows the Liberian.
Okay, I see you.
There's some more on the other page too. Lots of them. Some of them are in Liberia now, like Jell is in Liberia.
Wonderful.
Michelle is in Liberia. Yeah.
Okay. Fantastic.
You're welcome to stay and listen to our next speaker, Yvette. I know it's late there, so.
Yeah, it's late. I'm getting ready for another meeting. Okay.
We'll let you go.
Take care. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye. Bye.